So you're very welcome to today's session. We are delighted to have James Place join us today. So suicide levels in the Irish community in Britain have remained consistently high for over 3 decades and have not shown the decline seen in other populations. Mental ill health and suicide are a particular issue for Irish travellers, in addition to their low life expectancy and poor health profile. Men are 3 times more likely to die from suicide than women. So James's Place are a charity offering free life-saving support to men in suicidal crisis. They offer treatment to suicidal men at their centres in London, Liverpool and Newcastle. Their treatment is proven to work, quick to access and delivered in a safe, friendly, non-clinical environment by trained professional therapists who access and plan care for those presenting in suicidal crisis. So we're delighted to have them here today to talk more about it and the referral process. So today we have joining us Ellen O'Donoghue. Ellen, you're welcome, the Chief Executive Officer at James's Place, and Andy Noon, Head of Centre at James's Place Charity in Liverpool. So you're very welcome, and I will hand the floor over to you, Andy.
Thank you very much, Ellen, for the introduction, and good morning, everyone. Lovely to see so many of you here this morning to find out a little bit more about James's Place and obviously about preventing suicide, providing hope for people that you're working with or coming into contact with. So as Ellen mentioned, my name's Andy Noon. I'm the Head of Centre at James's Place in Liverpool. My background is in mental health nursing, so I've worked in acute mental health hospitals across Liverpool and Merseyside before specialising in a role in psychosis, so working with people aged 14 to 35 experiencing psychosis for the first time, or moving into a role with James Place and specialising in suicide across the team and leading the team in Liverpool. I have also gone through my own experience of a suicidal crisis as well, something I always touch on, which helps me to relate to the men that we're working with. So as I mentioned to Ellen before it started, if there's any questions at the end that I might be able to help with from that point of view, please feel free to ask. Ellen is with us today, so Ellen's our CEO at James's Place, so she'd be more than happy to get involved in any of the questions as well that anybody does have. I know the chat function is open if you want to ask any questions right throughout, and we'll get to them at the end or during, Ellen, if you do want to ask any. Okay, so just touching a little bit about James's Place. Hopefully everyone here has already heard about James's Place in the past. If not, don't worry, I'm going to go through for the next 15-20 minutes a little bit more about James's Place and hopefully inform you so you can advocate on our behalf when working with men or anyone who identifies as a man in a suicidal crisis moving forward. So a little bit about the charity itself then. So the charity was set up following the tragic death of this man, James Wentworth Stanley, who was a 21-year-old who took his own life in 2006. And this was following him seeking support for his mental health, for anxiety and suicidal thoughts, but unfortunately was unable to get the support that he needed at that time, and felt that his solution to deal with how he was feeling and to deal with the problems that he was facing was in order to take his own life, which unfortunately he did. Obviously, bereaved family and his mum and dad come together in order to try and stop other people, other families going through the same situation. And in 2008, James's Place was set up and went through a period in time of being a grant-giving organisation, supporting other organisations who were doing great work across the country in order to help people, who were struggling with their mental health, or to help people who were seeking support for their mental health. There always was an idea of from Claire and Nick to open up a centre that the likes of James, someone in James's position, would be able to access free support very quickly, and he sat in front of a therapist in the, I suppose, the best possible way, in a very supportive environment. And they always had this key idea, this idea of opening up a centre, which was opened in 2018. So in the top left that you can see, 2018 in Liverpool, the first James's Place Centre was launched for men in suicidal crisis. From that date, we've been able to support over 1,500 men in that time in the Liverpool centre, which really shows the need for the centre in the northwest, which is the second highest suicide rate in the whole of the country. In 2022, we were able to open up, based on the success of the Liverpool centre, we were able to use that evidence in order to open up a new centre in London. So we opened up a second centre with over 350 men accessing support in the time with our trained therapists. Last month, we were able to open up in Newcastle as well, in the northeast, which is a real need for support for people in the northeast of the country, with having the highest suicide rate within the country. Obviously, there's a lot of need there, and we're very glad to be opened up there. And already the team that is set up is working with a lot of men at the moment, which is fantastic. We're proving through evaluation, something which I'll touch on in a little bit more detail. So we work very closely with John Moores University in Liverpool, and they evaluate all of the work that we do in order to give us that evidence base to know how effective the work is that we're doing, but also to inform other areas that we can focus on, and other areas that we need to be aware of when working with men to be the most effective service we can. We do have plans to open up further centres. We do have plans to open up Birmingham in 2025. So that will cover another part of the country, and we will have 5 centres open by 2026. And the idea behind that is that half the men within the country will be within travel distance of a James's Place centre, and we estimate that 2,000 men per year will be engaging in free support with James's Place to support them through a suicidal crisis, which is obviously all of us in the team are very driven to be part of the team opening up the 5 centres to support as many people as we possibly can who need our help. And since our inception, we've been able to support over 1,800 men completely free who are in a suicidal crisis, and I'll go through a little bit more detail how we do that just shortly. So a little bit about our model then. So how do we go about what we do at James's Place? So you might see at the bottom here, number 1 is lay your cards on the table approach. This is something I'm going to go into in more detail as well. But just to touch on this, we have quite a unique intervention at James's Place. It's not the standard therapy that people might be familiar with. We use an intervention called lay your cards on the table, which I'll go through why it's particularly important working with men who are in a suicidal crisis. And typically men like cards as well, so it's always useful to use an aid that really helps us with that in terms of breaking down some barriers to communicating and engagement. Rapid access. I know a lot of people here today might be quite keen to understand how big our waiting list is, and it's quite simple. We don't have one. We don't have a waiting list at all. We've got rapid access to our treatments. So if we receive a referral, we make a decision on that referral that day if we're the right place for someone. And if we are, someone will be offered a welcome assessment within 48 working hours. So that's really important to us, because we know that the data shows us that anything over 48 hours from someone seeking support, whether that be at the GP, whether that be with a mental health professional, whether that be at A&E, we know that the 48-hour window is crucial, because anything over that 48-hour window increases the chances of someone making an attempt on their own life, which obviously we want to avoid, because we've got an alternative solution for them to engage in. So that's why we're so rapid with dealing with referrals and getting the person sat in front of us as soon as we possibly can. A lot of the time it's the same day. So say, for example, if we've got a slot in the afternoon and we get a referral in the morning, we will offer that person the next available slot within 48 working hours. Suicide prevention therapist. So as I mentioned, my background is in mental health nursing. We have other healthcare professionals within our team. So everybody is a registered professional, whether that be a nurse, whether that be an occupational therapist, whether that be a psychotherapist or a counsellor. We're all registered professionals. We're not a voluntary van service. So we do have a background working with people who are in a suicidal crisis, but also with other backgrounds bringing in necessary skills in order to work holistically across the centres. Our environment is absolutely key. You might see some pictures in this presentation today, or if you're ever lucky enough to visit us at James's Place, maybe some of our open days, you'll see the environment that we create. And we work very hard to intentionally create an environment that is non-clinical, so that people feel welcome, people feel that there's not a barrier to them sharing. We do know through just talking to people that sometimes go into a clinic, white walls and sort of people walking around in white coats, that can be a massive barrier straight away. Or sometimes people will say if they go somewhere and there's a glass screen in front of the receptionist, that can often be really off-putting for people. So we wanted to create an environment that was really welcoming to people and give people a space to feel safe in order to open up. Most of the time, for the first time in their life, that's what we're asking them to do. So we know the environment's key. Not only that, we're aware of the environments that we're working in. So for Liverpool, for example, I need to know, and the team need to know what is going on in our local community. What are the current needs in our local community? And it's the same in London and the same in Newcastle. We see very common themes within across our centres, but the environment and the cultures and communities that we're working in are different. So it's very important for us to be connected with local services, with local people in our area to make sure that we're up to date with the current needs. And number 5, partnerships and referral pathways. Key part of what we do is our engagement work, which is part of what we're doing here today, and meeting everyone on the call, educating you guys a little bit more about how we operate, give you the opportunity to ask good questions, and hopefully a shared learning across organisations. You know, I've got a few questions I'd love to know a little bit more about as well, and get to know your individual organisations following today, and working in collaboration, working in partnership in order to create successful referral pathways with the person in mind, the person in the centre of that, and working to their needs and what's the best solution for that person. So as I mentioned, a little bit more about the intervention itself. So lay your cards on the table is the approach we use. So it's a formulation-based approach that we deliver. So that means that when someone comes into us and we do a welcome assessment, that is an opportunity for us to find out a little bit more about them, to find out what's been going on recently for that person, but then also a little bit about their social background, some of their cultural and some of their belief systems that might have contributed to them being there. But where we really explore that is through the intervention itself. So we use decks of cards, 4 decks of cards. First deck being what is happening now. So that really helps us unpick what someone's current thought process is. So an example that might be in there is someone saying, I think about killing myself all the time. I've got no hope for the future. They'd be better off without me. Some cards that within that small deck in the blue pack. They come up pretty much every session. That's really feeling of being a burden on family and friends. So that's very common for that to come up. So that helps us then unpick someone's thought process a little bit more to communication aid. It then goes into how it manifests on a physical level for someone. When someone's sat in front of us, it's very likely that anxiety is high. If they're in a situation where they're seeing suicide as a solution, then the likelihood is they feel trapped, they feel stuck, feeling like that, and anxiety is very common. So physical symptoms are very present usually. But often at time we won't know that they're symptoms of anxiety. We won't know, we won't understand that. We'll just think that we've got a very fast heartbeat, or we've got butterflies, or we've got that sort of gut feeling that something isn't quite right, and dread. And often we haven't made the link that that is due to me circumstances, or that is due to anxiety. So that can really be reassuring to people to find that out. We then move into other cards. Probably my opinion is that this is the biggest part of the whole intervention, and it's the psychological and the emotional impact that the situation is currently having on someone. So we'll look at emotions, very strong emotions such as guilt, very strong emotions such as loneliness, look at emotions such as feeling trapped. And my opinion again is that working with men, typically, I don't feel in a lot of cases that men would feel comfortable sharing that, just verbally, looking at maintaining eye contact with someone and sharing, feel lonely is a very emasculating sort of experience for a man, typically that we work with. But using the cards can really help people to do that, to communicate a particular emotion without having to sort of confront it, looking at someone. So that can be really helpful. And the last part of that sequence, we'll start looking at how it's manifesting for someone in their actions. So we'll start looking at, because of their situation, they're sort of isolating themselves away from others, or they might be, I don't know, using drugs and alcohol to cope with how they're feeling. So we'll really help people map that out, what's currently happening for them. We then start moving as the intervention goes on and the person starts feeling more comfortable sharing what's going on. We start looking at how they got there. Putting a visual timeline in front of them can be really helpful to reinforce why they're there and why they've walked in the door at James's Place, how they've got to where they are in life. But then with that as well can give them a lot of power in at least understanding where they've got and what they need to focus on in order to get out of that situation. As we start moving through the intervention, we then start moving into what's keeping the problem going for someone. So we often see themes right throughout the intervention. So I'm going to pick drugs and alcohol, say, for example, might come up in the blue cards. It might be present in the yellow cards. And if it's there in the red cards as well, that's highlighting a pattern to the person that this is an area that is contributing towards their crisis, contributing towards their poor mental health. And then that can really help empower them in order to make that positive change in that area in their life. And then we start going towards the back end of the intervention is how can I get through this? What skills, what has the person developed? What coping strategies has the person got or can develop in order to get through this current crisis? And also any crisis that comes along in the future as well. What can that person learn about themselves? And at this point, we create a safety plan with the person, which is a step-by-step individual plan for that person in order to identify their warning signs and to identify when a crisis is looming. But what can they do at that instance? What can they internally do themselves without contacting another person? But then also, what can other people do to support them? What other people, whether that be family members, friends, colleagues, what can other people do? What can I communicate now I'm well to let them know if I do present this way, this is how you can best help me. So we do a lot of work on that point whilst we sort of plan for that person's future with them. So it might be further support that the person needs, or it might be that person feels ready to go back to work, or whatever that might be for that individual. We'll support them with that future plan as well. That intervention, we work with people for 6 to 8 weeks. And our job is to take someone out of a suicidal crisis. So if someone comes to us and they are seeing suicide as a solution to their problems, or they've recently made an attempt on their own life, they'll be working with us for 6 to 8 weeks. And through this intervention, we've been able to evidence that we can take people out of that crisis. In 6 to 8 weeks, we're not able to offer that longevity of recovery and sort of obviously we haven't got the time to be able to go into very deep trauma or to a lot of different things. So we work very closely with other organisations in order to help people with that recovery following our intervention. Our job is to take someone away from the crisis point and help people to understand that there are other options available. And I was explaining this a little bit to Ellen earlier before, that often the time we will say, when we do unfortunately hear the tragic news of someone taking their own life, we'll hear people say that, well, they seem to have everything in life. You know, they have money, or they have the family, they have the car, whatever that might be, all the materialistic things in the world. And we can't seem to understand it, especially as a loved one. We can't understand it. We can't sort of process why the person took the steps they did. There was no signs, we'll often hear. And it's something that Rory O'Connor, who is one of our trustees, he's an expert in this field. He talks about it in words that we understand of cognitive narrowing. Say, for example, so if you can imagine, we all have a lens, and we can see all the options available to us in our life. Suicide in there for every single one of us in a particular set of circumstances. However, there's also a lot of different options that we can see. So we can see the impact that would have on loved ones, our future plans, the things that protect us from taking our own life. But what can start happening if we're going through these, this trauma, or we're going through these very stressful and anxiety-provoking times in our life, that lens can start becoming narrower. But right until, for some people, they have a tunnel vision on suicide, and the impact that would have on that on family is on the outside of the lens. The materialistic things in the world are on the outside of that lens. Future plans that they have is on the outside of that lens, and the person will come narrow, laser focused on suicide as the solution to deal with the problems. And what we do through this intervention, in a nutshell, is help people to open up that lens again and start seeing the other options that are available to them. I'll give an example. Working with people who are in debt, you know, someone might come to us, and an example might be they're in £5,000 of debt, and that is a key reason why they're sat in front of us. So we'll often work with the person to say that £5,000 is not worth that person's life. Would you trade your life for £5,000? And 100% of the time, the person says, no, I'm worth more than that. But in that way, we've not been able to see the other things going on, and our lens has become very narrow. And we just help people to explore the other options that are available, rather than someone taking their own life. And obviously, as I mentioned, we're very successful in doing that. So a little bit more about that then. So our evaluation, as I mentioned, we work with Liverpool John Moores University to evaluate the work that we do. So we use two outcome measures at the moment. The first one is called Core 10, that some people might be familiar with, and that measures psychological distress. That measures how distressed the person is coming to us, which can really give us an understanding of that person's crisis. Another measure that we use is something called ESF, which is entrapment. That is what I mentioned before. When someone feels trapped, when someone feels stuck, and someone feels like they can't get out of the situation that they're in, that can be linked to suicide. That can be linked to feeling like suicide is an option. So that's another measure that we follow. On the left, I've got some scores from year 1 and year 2 combined, which shows our core, so our psychological distress levels. When people are coming into us, year 1 and year 2 combined, 86.5 is a very high score. It's on the severe scale of psychological distress. So that's the point that people are coming into us. And when they're finishing with us, these individuals are finishing with us, an average final score, 35.4, show a change of 50.9, which from an outcome measure point of view is very, very successful. And as I mentioned, in 6 to 8 weeks, our job is to take someone from a suicidal crisis out of that crisis, for them to sort of focus on other options that are available to them. You can see on the scales here as well. So entrapment is this scale here. So that is a scale that we use, and the maximum number is 16. So it's a 4-scale model that we use, and it's up to 16. And often people who come to us are a score of 15 or 16, and we help people to take that score down statistically under 10, which we usually find once we get to around the score of 10, we start seeing a different person. We start seeing a different individual. You can see it in their eyes. You can see it in the body language. They're starting to believe in themselves and in their recovery. But at 15, 16, we often see people who can't see any other way out of dealing with the circumstances. So a little bit more about our referral criteria and process then, which is really key for you guys today to know in order to advocate for James's Place when working with people in the future. So we work with men 18 plus or anybody who identifies as a male over the age of 18. Someone who's experiencing a suicidal crisis, which is driven by psychosocial stresses. Okay, so what does that mean? So we work with people who have, for examples, might be relationship breakdowns, it might be poverty, financial issues, it might be people who are in probation services or awaiting a court case. We work with people who um, have had family difficulties or might be going through social services. These very stressful social things that can be going on for people. And often people are isolated away from others, or people don't have a support network around them in order to receive the support that they need at that time. So psychologically and socially, there's a lot of stress there for that person. We don't typically work with people with enduring mental illness. So what does that mean? It means if someone does have I don't know, as active symptoms of psychosis, or they have a diagnosis of bipolar disorder and the symptoms present, we might not be that right place for that person at the time because we've got services that are more specialised to support people with them conditions or with that illness. As I mentioned, we're working with people in that sort of crisis point based on psychological and social stress-induced situations. We work with people who are able to engage and benefit from talking therapy. So again, if often get asked the case about people who would, might be drinking or they might be taking drugs, are people able to engage with us? And I suppose we base it on an individual level. We do know that alcohol and sometimes drugs can be used as a coping strategy. However, if someone is in an active addiction and they're not able to engage with us, we know that we're not the right place for them at that time because we're in intense talking therapy. And we wouldn't want to do that person at the service. However, if they're able to sort of work with us to engage with alcohol or drug services, or they're able to abstain from substances, we're more than happy to work with people. I suppose it's based on if they're able to engage and benefit from talking therapy in a safe way. Someone who's not eligible for secondary mental health support, and someone who's willing to work with us and register with a GP as well. So we do take full clinical responsibility for the people that we work with because we are professionals and we're sort of clinical service. And we work very closely with people's GPs in order to communicate with them, in order to inform them of where things are up to, which is a very important part of what we do. So we do need the person to be willing to work with us, come to our centre for face-to-face therapy, and also register with a GP. A little bit about our referral process then. So we receive referrals every single day, and they come in the form of self-referrals, they come in the form of professional referrals, the likes of GPs or mental health nurses across the areas that we work in. And also referrals on behalf of colleagues or friends and family as well. So we accept referrals from everywhere, providing that the person is aware of that referral being made and they consent to that referral. We make a referral decision the same working day. So if it's in Liverpool, it'll be myself or our senior therapist who will be covering for that day. And if we receive a referral, we'll make a decision based on the information if we feel we're the right place to support someone. And if we are, which is often the case, we'll offer a welcome assessment within 48 hours, which I mentioned before, that opportunity to find out a little bit more about that person's needs, but also give that person the opportunity to find out about us and make sure we're the right service for them, because it's got to be a collaboration between us and them together. If we are the right place and we're the right place for that person, we're the right place to support them, we'll then be commencing 6 to 8 sessions of lay your cards on the table intervention, or we plan someone's discharge with them and the discharge from our service. People do often, a question that we get asked, do people come back to us? Absolutely. People always, sort of are always welcome to make a referral to us if they're in a suicidal crisis. We do often have people who've been with us a couple of years back, who've been doing very well, but then they've had a number of different stresses in their life, unfortunately gone back to feeling a suicide a solution. However, part of their safety plan is to contact James's Place, so they've been able to utilise that safety plan, the safety mechanisms they've got in place in order to contact us and start an intervention again, or come back in for a top-up intervention. I've got a video to play. This is a service user, it's a client that has accessed James's Place in the past in Liverpool, and he gives a bit of an insight into the difficulties that he was facing and a little bit more about the future, is the hope that he gained for the future.
I didn't see a future in doing anything that I was doing, or a future that had me in it. That was it. I was just like last resort sort of thing. So I actually got tricked into going to the doctors. I didn't know I was going. I spoke to the doctor at that point. To me, it didn't matter who knew how I felt. And then, doctor just let me contact this James's Place and, just give it one last go sort of thing. So I did. I remember we parked just down a couple of streets down, and we walked it out to get walked to the door. The door opened, and I was just like, "Yeah, go on, man. We'll give it a go." It's weird to find that someone cared about finding the root of the issue more than just cared about me, because there's one thing someone just caring about you and keeping you alive, but it's another thing trying to stop what's wanting to make me die. Which was, what the difference was. The more open I felt to talk about it, the more I'd feel myself getting better. I mean, it was 3 years ago. I was on rock bottom, real rock bottom, and I'm not 100% every day when I wake up in the morning. But when I look at where I was 3 years ago and look where I am today, there's a complete difference. And at that point, I didn't think there was a future for me. Talk to someone and find a good support network, which is obviously easier said than done. But the first step's wanting to feel a bit better about yourself when you wake up in the morning. Make one step and the rest will follow.
Yeah, so just a little bit from a perspective of a man who's accessed the service, just to give a bit of an understanding, who obviously very bravely done that video to evidence the impact of the work that we're able to do, to take him from a place where he didn't see any hope for the future. In his words, he's at rock bottom and able to work in order to solve his own problems, in essence. And I think that the beauty of the cards, and this is again my experience working with men, is that there's something very unique in giving someone as a standard therapy, you can give someone the tools by talking and telling someone what they should do. Giving someone a deck of cards in order to solve their own problems in front of them can be a very empowering and a very nice thing to see someone taking that responsibility for their own recovery and being able to sort of solve it themselves, and having the power to be able to do that in therapy, I think is very powerful. So that's another benefit that I missed out before talking about the cards. Cool. And that's it in terms of the presentation itself. I know Ellen is on the call as well. I'm not too sure, Ellen, if you want to take back over now to see if there's any questions, or if you had any questions yourself. I know I've got one for everyone in the room as well, so hopefully there's a few coming over this way.
Thank you, Andy. Yeah, no, I'm very happy you asked your question, and then we can take the questions in the Q&A as well.
So So my question to everyone, I know if through speaking to Ellen, there's other organisations that are here, all coming together in order to support people. I suppose my question would be in terms of, from my point of view, I do a lot of outreach and engagement work in order to make sure that more men, more families, more people know about James's Place. And I do know through working in other roles that the travelling community can be a very difficult community in order to engage with. There's a lot of barriers for people to access support in the first instance, but I do know that there is more barriers for people from travelling community. And just to see if anybody had any suggestions or any help from me to be able to sort of look at that and see if it's anything that we can do in order to break down those barriers and make sure people are aware of the support we offer and help people to engage in that support. Would be my question.
Thanks for that, Andy. I see Danny has his hand up. I've just asked in the chat there, Danny, if you're okay for me to turn on your mic to ask your question. But just until he replies to that, I'm wondering, Andy, if before we get on to the questions, and we'll get back to your one, which I think is definitely a topic that we should explore, would it be possible to just quickly have a look at the referral page and see how
Yeah, of course.
that referral is done, if that's possible, and then we can get back to the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Just let me, I'm just going to share. Fortunately, I've got the website already ready to send everyone the link at the end. Oh, just bear with us. There we are. So for everybody on the call, which I'll send this link to everybody as well. And Ellen, if you could send an email out as well, that'd be really helpful. Our website for James's Place is www.jamesesplace.org.uk. And through putting that in, you will come to this page in front of you, the home page, where you'll be able to sort of see a little bit more about our news, sign up to our newsletter to keep in mind what we've got going on at the centre or any latest news. We also have open days that you'd be able to hopefully join us for in the future. But I suppose if you are looking to refer someone, most important page is this yellow part here, is Get Support. So by clicking on that, it'll take you through to a little bit of information about making a referral, whether that be a self-referral or referral for someone that you're in contact with. And it gives you a little bit more information of what you need to do. The referral form link, if you click on that hyperlink, it'll take you through to our referral form. And that there will obviously just ask you questions to fill in. So the first question obviously being, what area are you referring someone to? And just to point out as well, we're not bound by postcodes. If someone's able to safely get to our service, we will support someone. So Liverpool, even though the centre's in Liverpool, we work right across the northwest. London, obviously, if anyone can get to London safely, we work with people, and Newcastle covering the whole of the northeast as well. Are you referring yourself? Yes or no? Then that'll take you to a different set of questions and so forth. That it will go in that format, and you just provide us with as much information as possible to help us. What I will say as well, that people often aren't too familiar with, is that you can contact us via phone in order to talk through a referral, talk through a situation that you're faced with, and we can help you, whether that person is in a suicidal crisis and how to refer that person to us, and we can talk you through that. So don't be shy. Give us a call as well. We're more than happy to help.
That's great, Andy. Thanks so much for that. So does that mean that people who aren't necessarily living in the cities, if they're able to access the city, they can utilise the service?
Absolutely. We wouldn't turn anybody down. The only time we speak to the person and really consider it is if that travel puts someone at a higher risk of attempting an attempt on their own life, then we would have that discussion with the person. But if someone's able to safely get to engage in the free support, then it doesn't matter where they're from, we will support them.
Thank you for that. I know you had asked a question to participants, Andy, which is a little bit difficult when we're in the webinar format. But if anyone would like to be unmuted, please write into the chat and I can allow you to talk. I've just got permission from Andy or from Danny Maher to add him into the conversation. So Danny, I'm just going to allow you to talk now. You should be. Are you there? I think you just need to unmute yourself. Yeah, now you're in.
You can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Hi, Danny.
Hi,
Thanks
hi.
for joining.
Thanks, Andy. Great presentation. Sounds like great service. My question is really around funding, and certainly here in London, there seems to be kind of incoherence around the funding programs available for these kind of services. And I'm just wondering how you managed to persuade, if statutory services are funding you, how did you persuade them to support this initiative? And what were the kind of challenges in doing that?
Andy, shall I jump in to answer that one?
Yeah, thanks, Danny. I was going to say, Ellen, I think it might be best taking that one on.
I'm really sorry, my video doesn't seem to be working. It's switched on, but there seems to be a black screen. Let me know if you can think of anything I can do about that. But yeah, so James's Place as a charity is entirely charitably funded, so we don't use statutory money to run the services. Which is obviously quite a big and difficult decision for us. But we are run by people making donations, trusts and foundations, individual giving, some corporate support. So, yeah, very much kind of people, you know, running races, raising money, holding dinners, that kind of thing. And that's partly because what we do is, I suppose, unique, it's innovative. We wanted to be able to focus on proving the effectiveness of the specific thing that we do rather than bidding for existing contracts. But it's, you know, it's a very difficult fundraising climate, and I completely recognise what you say about the kind of difficulty in this landscape of finding support.
Thank you. Great.
Thanks, Danny. I have a good few more questions that have come through, and we only have 15 minutes left, so I'm going to jump into them if that's okay. So the first one, how can we refer an individual to the service? How long is the wait, and is face-to-face guaranteed? I think you might have answered that in your presentation already, but it's good to recover.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, going through on the website is the best way, or give us a call for the centre that you're hoping to refer someone to, and we'll talk you through that. So I'll send that link out to everybody in order to make that referral. As I mentioned, we make a decision that day, and we'll inform you regardless whether that person, whatever that decision might be, and if we are the right service for that person to be sat in front of us within 48 hours, if they're able to and willing to engage with us. So hopefully, and that's for face-to-face free therapy as well.
Great, thanks for that, Andy. So another one that came in times of crisis, as a landlord, we would seek emergency support from 999 operatives. Recently, the process has changed and police no longer attend for welfare checks if we believe a person is at risk to themselves. How can we support a person in crisis? Oh, Ellen, we can see you now. Your video is working. Sorry, Andy. Yeah.
No, that's a really good question. So sorry, could you repeat it?
Yes, no problem. In times of crisis, as a landlord, we would seek emergency support from 999 operatives. Recently, the process has changed and police no longer attend for welfare checks if we believe a person is at risk to themselves. How can we support a person in crisis?
I mean, this is an issue that we're aware of too, obviously, and I think it's really difficult, and it's a very changing kind of situation to be in. I think that we would have similarly run welfare checks ourselves in a similar way. So I think being aware of where the support can be available from is probably really key. James's Place isn't a kind of blue light service. We're not open 24/7, so we often work closely with local crisis teams, local A&E departments and so forth, so that if we don't think someone can keep themselves safe until they can come into us, for example, we will direct them there. But it's a big challenge. I don't know, Andy, if there's anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And all we can do as people working with people is control what we can control, and keeping in contact with that person, keeping in contact with services, and obviously reinforcing our thought of this person needs support, and contacting services that who we can, what services are available as well. Bringing in other organisations as well. So I know the Hub of Hope, if people aren't aware of that service, is a app or a desktop version you can use. You can put in someone's postcode, whether it be your own or someone else's, and it'll show all mental health services, statutory services, but also third sector organisations in that area. So if your organisation is not on there and provides mental health support, I definitely recommend you guys contact them. But that can be really helpful as well to get support from other organisations, in order to holistically support the person who's in difficulty.
I think it's worth saying that at James's Place, we are trying to do something that doesn't replicate existing services. So we're trying to add something, I suppose, to the system. So there's a gap that we see men falling into, that we know that James fell into, and that's what we've been set up to address. And so as a result, we work best when we're working with the wider services and sectors, so with statutory services and also with the voluntary sector. And it is a real challenge. I think that it's no surprise to anyone to say that existing services are incredibly stretched, and that affects us just as it affects, I'm sure, all of us working here today. So I think there's sometimes a kind of an ideal way that you would set up a service like ours, and sometimes a way that you have to work with what is available to people elsewhere in the sector. And so that's what we're trying to do always, is take that pragmatic view so that we help as many people as we can, and we offer as much support as we can, whilst recognising that there will be gaps elsewhere that we just can't fill.
Thank you for that, Andy and Ellen. Another question: how could I suggest this intervention to young men who might feel ashamed to be seen as weak for seeking help?
I mean, that is such a good question. It was interesting actually in the film that Andy showed. I think he talks about being tricked into going to the GP. I think that a lot of the men who come to us do not believe that anyone can help them. So it's not even that they're ashamed to seek help, it's that they have gone past the point where they feel hopeful that help is going to be there and that it's going to be effective. So a big part of what we do is to just get people to trust us, to stick with the intervention for the next few days, weeks. And what we can point to is that we've seen nearly 2,000 men, all of whom didn't believe that there was anyone who could help them. They'd all come to see suicide as the only way that they had out, and they all came to a point where they felt that they could carry on. So I think sometimes it's just about asking people, recognising the truth of what people are saying. They don't believe that help is there. They don't want to tell people how they're feeling. Very few of the men that we see will have told somebody how they're feeling prior to talking to us. And then I think sometimes it's about a more general kind of normalising of talking about suicide in society. Like, I'd worked in health and public health, all my working life. And when I came to James's Place 5 years ago, I'd never worked on suicide specifically before. And I was very struck by the stigma around suicide, by how difficult it is for people to talk about it. And I think everybody has got a kind of a part to play in reducing that. I remember talking to a young man who'd lost his dad to suicide, and he said to me, I think he was 18 at the time, he said that he was having to explain to people what his dad had done at a time when he needed people to be leaning in to him and helping him. And I think there's a really key thing in recognising across the board, whether as somebody working in the field, somebody who has been bereaved, somebody who's been suicidal, and any of us who are ever in contact with anyone who might be unhappy, and just thinking about what we can do to make it okay and more normal to seek help for this kind of thing. Can I just mention quickly, I don't want to talk too long, but we had a really interesting thing. The UFC fighter Paddy Pimblett talked on social media a few years ago now about having lost a friend to suicide, and he then got in touch with us and wanted to talk about James's Place. So just before Christmas, the year before last, he put out a short piece on Instagram about James's Place. And what was really striking is that over that Christmas period, we got a number of very specific self-referrals in. So that was people coming directly to us, and they were all, young men from very deprived, kind of lower socioeconomic group backgrounds. And they were all acutely suicidal, and they were not in contact with anybody else. And that really showed us they were exactly the men that we need to reach. And it was about the way that Paddy spoke to them, did something to open, our doors to them. So I think sometimes it's about recognizing that I might not be the best person to speak to a group of young men. And so Andy and his team in Liverpool and our other teams in London and Newcastle do a lot of work on outreach, about getting out there to tell people that this service exists and that it's ready to help them.
Thank you for that. Oh, sorry, Andy. Yeah.
Sorry, I'll just say to add to that, you're saying there, Ellen, on YouTube, we have a channel, a lot of great videos. We've got another one of Marcus's story more recently, but also Paddy Pimblett has done a sort of YouTube video where he's come to visit the centre and stuff like that. So I would say, if working with young men who might not feel ready, or if they're unsure, show them a few videos. Normally that content can really be effective in that convincing, if you like, or advocating for the service.
Thank you both. I have a few more questions, so I know we're running out of time, so I'll just try and quickly get through some of them. Do you support people who are already receiving talking therapy from other organisations?
Yeah, so we often get referrals from other organisations, such as talking therapies, or such as, statutory lower level services. But we're the only place in the country, we're the only place that can provide the support for the crisis. We're an alternative to home-based treatment. So what we will say, if someone is engaging in talking therapies, say for example, and the need have reached the threshold of a suicidal crisis, we will need that other team to stop doing that therapy while we sort of commence our therapy, because two therapies coinciding with each other it can be very difficult for the person. But we often do receive referrals and accept referrals from people, but as long as they're not engaging in that therapy, if that makes sense. And then following, when we've done our piece of work, we're able then to sort of refer back into that level of support. But as I said, we're the only place in the country that can do what we do at the level that we're working at.
Great, thank you very much. And do interventions happen only at the centres, or do you offer detached support?
Just to say no, at the moment the interventions only happen at the centres. The centre itself is a core part of the model, so we design them to feel kind of, I suppose, safe and welcoming, non-clinical from the moment a man arrives. However, we are conducting a number of pilots over the next few years. We're currently doing a pilot with 16 and 17-year-olds in Liverpool to see if we can extend our service to the lower age group, and we may consider doing a pilot where we take the service out into another setting. Given the level of, I suppose, clinical need that we work with, we are incredibly cautious and careful about how we deliver the service. So we would only ever test, I suppose, innovations to it in quite a structured way, but that's certainly something that we look at in the next couple of years, I think.
Thanks very much. Do you support or have resources for family members dealing with the aftermath of a suicide or attempt to commit?
No is the honest and kind of blunt answer to that, but we do work really closely with other organisations in the sector. So I sit on the National Suicide Prevention Alliance, and we work with people like SASP, Support After Suicide Partnership, and there are other brilliant charities like Winston's Wish who support bereaved children, for example. So we would always signpost people, but what we do is very specific in offering this clinical intervention. We have in the past, again, piloted offering a little bit of support to the key supporters of the men who come to us. So that was a kind of one-to-one therapy session with one of our therapists while their loved one was experiencing therapy at James's Place. And so that's the kind of level of support that we are able to offer, but we are very specific in what we do.
Right, thank you. Sorry, I know I'm firing questions at you now, but there's two more and then we're there. So why is it men only?
And the men only is just because of the numbers. So men are 3 times more likely to die by suicide than women. It's the leading cause of death for men under 50. We also know that services that are for men and women are often more used by women than by men. So in talking therapies, you see that kind of across the board in statutory services, for example. And so what we wanted to do was create a service that met the needs of this very high risk group, but that we could really target at them as well. So being really clear. Honestly, I would love to see a James's Place intervention or style of intervention for women. I think there are some really worrying trends we're seeing about young people and young women. But I think, again, it would have to be done probably by a different organisation who had the kind of funds and focus to do it properly, or in a kind of really rigorous piloted way, because I think the kind of crisis that we see might be slightly different.
Right, thank you. I feel like how targeted James's Place is really the trick to it, and the reason why you're so successful. And yeah, you're just such an amazing organization, and we're so delighted to collaborate with you because it's such an important service that you provide. So yeah, thank you so much for talking with us today. We really appreciate it. And I know all of our participants and members who are on today, there's a good few bits that we'll want to share with you after. And I know it was difficult that we couldn't really have a chat today in the webinar function. So maybe in future we could maybe plan to have a focus group discussion where we could have a proper chat with our members. But that was so useful this morning today to get an introduction and how to refer and who's eligible. And yeah, just thank you so much for joining. We really appreciate it. Is there anything else that you want to add before?
Hey, thank you so much for having us. I really admire the work that you do and that you all do, and I think we would love to stay in touch and collaborate further. So thank you for having us.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think we'll end
Thank
it
you
there. Just for time. Andy and Ellen, thank you so much. Thank you. We really appreciate it, and to everyone for joining this morning. Okay, and we'll be in touch.
Take care.